Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and today I wanted to get a chance to talk about the criminal justice system, false incarcerations. Many of us are concerned about the state of the criminal justice system in America and what it does to Black people. And so many of you know about my favorite criminologist, Dr. Chenelle Jones, out of, I want to say, Ohio Dominican University. Did I get that right? Okay, I want to make sure I got that right. Yes, you did. I want to make sure I got that right. And she's sporting the coolest afro or afro-like hairstyle that I have seen in a while. And so first I want to ask Dr. Jones, how are you today?
I'm good. A little tired, but I'm good.
Really? You know what? It's like this battle is it makes us weary. All of us are tired, but you are a soldier. Like, you keep on fighting, and so I think the afro is kind of a cool way to kind of exemplify that. I love it. So anyway, but I don't know. Is that an afro, or am I mischaracterizing the hairstyle?
No, this is a pro. This is a wash and go. Every bit of natural.
That pretty much probably makes you the coolest professor I've ever seen. So Black Power. All right. So now I want to ask you. Now today you and I were talking, kind of offline about a discussion you saw today. You saw Michelle Alexander speak, and another gentleman I think named James Logan, and they were talking about the criminal justice system, the new Jim Crow. And I talked to Michelle a couple days ago, and we had an interesting conversation about something that I'm going to dig into a little bit later, which is really a conversation about reparations for the war on drugs and mass incarceration and all that. But we won't get into that today. We'll talk about that later. But another conversation you and I had recently was we talked about the Central Park Five, and we talked about that within the scope of all the false incarcerations that occur, all throughout the country every single day. And one of the points that one of the things we agreed on, number one, was that when you look at the Central Park Five, or you look at the incarceration of former Black Panther, or I guess is still the Black Panther, Marshall Eddie Conway, who was just released after 44 years in prison for killing a police officer. I think both of us agreed, number one, that some of these cases really sadden us and make us sick. In fact, you and I both talked about the movie, The Central Park Five, which we thought was a great movie, but it literally made us both physically sick when you saw what the police did to manipulate these young men into giving false confessions. And, one of the things that I asked you about, and I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on your response here, is I said, Dr. Jones, I think that really, the stuff that we see is really the tip of the iceberg. I think that every time there's one person released on a false conviction, there's at least 100 more who will never be released, whose cases will never go very far in the court of law, whose lives and legacies will pretty much be forgotten by society. And I think that that's really where we want to solve our problem. I mean, you've got a basement full of roaches, and you're killing the 1 out of 100 roaches that crawls into the living room, but you're not going into the basement, and you need to really bomb the basement if you really want to get to the root of the problem. So tell me, as an expert in criminology, and as someone who cares about this issue, as well as someone with the coolest Black afro I've seen in a while, tell me, I'm being silly here, but tell me, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I watched that. It was a documentary of the Central Park Five, and if anybody's watching this and you haven't had a chance to check it out, I strongly recommend that you go look at the documentary. Okay, that's my plug for the documentary. The only thing is, it made me just upset. I mean, it just made me upset. I didn't even finish actually watching the documentary because just how the entire system played out, how the entire scenario played out, they pretty much just set those boys up. And I think that it's just terrible. And, when you start to think about the motives of the prosecutors, the motives of the justice practitioners, the motives of the law enforcement, the officers, put all that together, and then you have these boys that they devalue their life because they think they're just disposable Black men. We're hitting on that notion again that, hey, we just want to solve this crime. We want somebody to take the burden and be convicted of it. And we just need a face of an alleged offender. And, it was unfortunate what happened to the victim. But the way that they manipulated the boys and got them to give those confessions, and they videotaped the confessions after they wrote them out, they just played on the emotions. I think they kept them in interrogation for quite some time, didn't give them food. The kids were teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and they just wanted to go home. So, of course, if you put a kid in that situation, you're constantly yelling at them, intimidating them. The child is vulnerable. They want to get home. They will do whatever they have to do just to get home, even if it is confess to a crime. And that seems, why would you ever say you did a crime or you committed a crime when you didn't? Well, until you're placed in that situation, until you're having people constantly yell at you, you probably will never understand the emotions that are going through the kid's head, what they're going through at that moment, and how that all plays a part in those forced confessions. And it is unfortunate because then what they actually did was they lied to the kids. So they told one kid, well, he said he saw you. And then that kid was like, whoa, well, if he said he lied on me, then I'm going to lie on him and say that he did it. But I found it interesting that none of the kids actually confessed to penetrating the victim. And so they pretty much just played off of each of those stories. There was no DNA evidence that linked any of them to the crime. And so it was just unfortunate. When we see a crime, usually we need some sort of scientific evidence. We need something other than, just the whole situation. We need some evidence. And so it was very unfortunate. And I think I was just frustrated. And I was even more frustrated when there was one kid, I forget what his name was, but he was confessing with his parents present. And his parents didn't tell him to stop. They just said, well, if you were there, if you did it, just going along with it. And, I'm thinking, well, what parent would let their kid just confess to a crime without an attorney present or anything like that? But then you think about, the structural inequalities and how these parents, how they're living, they probably just didn't know, or they were probably overwhelmed by the situation as well. And so they're just thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, confess. And so it was very unfortunate, and it just makes you angry. The documentary really made me angry when I saw what happened to those boys. And now what is even more upsetting is that they've postponed their settlement until they go through what's going on with the case and kind of hash out all of that, because I believe they're supposed to be settling for $250 million. They still have not received that yet. So, you put these boys' lives, wasted them for so many years, and then you have a guy that confesses to the crime later on, and still we haven't compensated these kids for that length of time that they've actually lost their childhood. It's unfortunate, but this is our justice system. This is our justice system that, our injustice system rather, that we rely on so much. And there are so many issues with that, and it does need to be fixed.
That's interesting, Dr. Jones, because it almost seems that, and just in case people are wondering, just to fill in that space, people should look this up. We're talking about the Central Park Five. These are 5 young African-American men who were convicted of allegedly raping an affluent white woman who was jogging through Central Park at 9:30 at night. But she was an investment banker, the daughter of an executive, so she had status. And, we know that people react differently when the victim is a white female than they do if it's, say, a black female or a black male or one of the other lives that are considered disposable. In fact, on the same day, there was another black woman that was raped in a different part of New York City on that same night, and she was thrown off a roof. And the media barely covered it. The police barely investigated it. It really didn't go very far. So, and we can imagine if the black woman had been raped in Central Park and the white woman had been thrown off the roof, then people would have been talking about, the victim being thrown off the roof, right? And I think that that's something that we consistently see. Now, one of the things I also observed that I thought about as well is that it seemed to me that when the parents were in there with their kids confessing, it almost makes me wonder if they were somehow deluded into believing that the officers were helping them, that they were their friends. I've seen that strategy kind of play out where it's sort of like, look, not only do you have good cop, bad cop, but maybe you can even have good cop, good cop. Like, look, I know you're a good kid. I know you didn't do this. You didn't do anything wrong. I just want you to go home. So just give me something that I need to put this guy away or to just, allow you to go home. And so I could see them sitting there and thinking, okay, I trust this person. They told me I can go home. Officers lie all the time. We know that. And then also, the parents and the child, maybe they felt that, number one, lawyers are expensive, but then number two, maybe somehow by calling an attorney into the situation, I would be creating this contentiousness or this tension between myself and this person who's helping me, right? Like, I can't help this officer do his job and send me home if I'm saying, give me a lawyer. Because if I say, give me a lawyer, that means I don't trust you, which is going to make you angry at me, which is going to make my situation worse, right? And I'm innocent anyway, so I believe in the system, and I believe that if I just give him what he wants, he's going to let me go home. Are there sort of standard tricks that police use to, I don't know, again, I don't know if this goes into your expertise in criminology, but what are some of the standard ways that, that bad officers, now mind you, we should make it clear that we don't believe every police officer is corrupt. In fact, my dad's a police officer, just for the record. But are there standard tricks a bad police officer might use to maybe coerce a confession or get somebody to do something that they didn't do?
Well, let me first say that I'm not a police officer, so I can't speak on behalf of all police departments, but I do think to some extent there are some corrupt cops out there. And not only that, there are some prosecutors with their own agenda. And, you pair the two, you have a corrupt cop, then you have a prosecutor who gets notoriety based upon the number of convictions that they can get. Of course, their goal is, let's not take this to trial. I'm going to do whatever I can to get you confessed to the crime or come out, with a plea so that I can still get, a star for another conviction because, my reputation is based upon that. I think there are some strong incentives that do motivate prosecutors and even police officers for that matter. And yes, there are some tricks that police officers do, the good cop, hey, I'm here to help you, I'm on your side, give me what I need is what I'm looking for. These are all modes of interrogation. This is part of the interrogation process. And so when you act like that, you give that persona that you're on their side, that you're there to help you, people then think, okay, this person really is there to help me when they may not even know any better. So probably just like those boys, if you have cops in your ear, one cop's yelling at you, the other cop is, I know you're tired, I know you're exhausted, I know you want to get home, just tell me that you committed this crime, tell me you were there in the practice to this lady. You do that for so many hours, you're naturally going to get a confession. Especially out of a vulnerable kid. Because these were kids at times. So you have these adults barreling down on them, you're going to get a confession. And this is standard practice. This happens more so than not. But again, I'm not a police officer and an expert in policing, but it does happen quite often. Yes.
Well, I personally think that, anybody who cares about justice in this country that has a position of power, that gets a chance to work in the Justice Department. If they really want to dig to the root of injustice, I think that what they should call for is, a greater budget to really do deeper investigations into what's going on. Into all these false convictions. You have organizations like the Innocence Project, which I don't believe can take on as many cases as they should. So let's say somehow we raised $100 million to give to, or to either give to or to create, groups of attorneys and paralegals and legal experts to investigate, crimes that, where the victim where the perpetrator has sufficient evidence that they didn't do it. I think that you would see lots of convictions being overturned. If the justice system did what it was supposed to do, which is really pursue justice, that would make a huge difference. But we know that they're more concerned, it seems, with following rules and procedures and protocols and protecting careers than they are of actually getting the truth. And I think that since people of color are the ones being hit the hardest, it's sort of like, okay, what do we do? Do we stain the reputation of a prestigious prosecutor or judge? Or do we do right by this poor black man that nobody gives a damn about anyway? That's pretty much what they're doing. And then what's interesting to me as well is, in fact, before I say that, I'll give you an example. I saw a story that we had on Your Black World not too long ago about a prosecutor who gave a man 25 years in prison by fabricating evidence, and the prosecutor got 10 days in jail. And the brother had served 20 out of 25 years or something crazy like that. So that's the trade-off that we're up against. And I think that what people have to see in order to understand the entirety of this is realize this is linked to slavery. I mean, if you go back to the 13th Amendment when slavery was abolished, and you have that little loophole clause that says, unless you're convicted of a felony, you move forward and you see that we're the ones that are most likely to be convicted of these felonies, most likely to be put back into slavery. There's not a disconnect there. I mean, there are economic incentives for us to kind of run the system the way we run it. So, anyway, I don't even know if that statement had a particular purpose, and it didn't even really lead to a question. But
it didn't to a question. I think I see what you're saying here, but I mean, when we tie it all into, you have prosecutors, who are they backed by? They are backed by a strong bureaucracy who are seeking to serve their own interests. Not only that, but, they have a lot of economic incentives, and, you put that up against a poor minority youth, and just a poor minority, of course the poor minority is probably going to lose every single time. And I think there was a comment that you said something about it being tied to slavery, imprisonment being tied to economic gain. We can get into the prison industrial complex and all that stuff. Well, I mean, it's no different than in the past when you had a convict leasing system where you had these convicts, you leased them out, and you made them work, all for economic gain of privileged whites. I mean, so it's the same thing. It's just a different name. And so it is unfortunate that we have this system. It is unfortunate that, especially with the Central Park Five, that was their fate. But, for that one wrongful conviction that we know of, like you said, how many other? There are hundreds, maybe even thousands more that we don't know about. The problem and the difference is because, especially between white individuals and black folks, is that most white folks either are connected to somebody with more resources, or they know somebody, or they have resources themselves, versus a black person, they might not know of those resources and have those resources, such as money to get a good attorney, to get good legal representation. And as a result of that, if you have a public defender, you're facing these crazy charges, and you don't just have that strong legal defense that you need, then more than likely they're going to find you guilty and lock you up, make money off of you because you're fueling this prison industrial complex. And then it's later down the line when we get, either somebody else confessing to the crime, like the Central Park Five, or some random DNA evidence just pops up somewhere that gets you exonerated. But it is so unfortunate that our system is like this, but it happens too many times, and we just really need to shift from, I always say, we know we have a problem. We have identified the problem. Now the shift needs to go to coming up with some tangible solutions to addressing the problem and to combating it, and so that's where I'm working towards going, because even today I was sitting in this conference and, wonderful presentation by Michelle Alexander, wonderful presentation by James Logan. But the discussion was around the problem. So many African Americans are incarcerated. So many people of color are incarcerated. So many people, are sentenced to longer prison sentences. So many of them are in isolation in these facilities. They're fueling this prison industrial complex. Well, we know that. We know that over and over again. Now we need to figure out what to do. Where do we go from here? How do we get over and beyond just the numbers, the sheer numbers and the sheer problem?
Wow. Well, I think that's a great point. And, Dr. Jones, you actually inspired me in terms of my thinking on on a way to kind of deal with this. I mean, here's the facts. We're dealing with a situation where people, most people, I believe, inherently want to do the right thing. I think, and the right thing is just the natural thing. The natural thing, for example, is to say that if you look at slavery, for example, slavery was bad, and I think most people knew that. Most people, even those who owned slaves, knew that there's something wrong with the ownership of another human being. Well, why would they then justify this kind of heinous behavior? Well, because they had a greater need that overrode the initial need to do the right thing, which is, the economic incentive, right? And so you create a bridge of justification by basically saying, look, you spread a doctrine that says these people are less than human anyway. You're actually helping them, by enslaving them, because there was a security in being a slave, right? You had food on your table, clothes on your back, a place to stay. Freedom means you have to go get all this stuff on your own. So there were literally people who felt that slaves were better off, by being slaves than they would have been by being free, right? The same argument is made maybe if you run a sweatshop in China. You say, well, look, these 5-year-olds wouldn't be able to feed their families if I didn't pay them $1 a day, so I'm actually helping them. And they agree that I'm helping them, right? Most of them, right? So, my point here is that, when you get into these messy incentives where you then have, economic reasons that people sort of uphold, a construct that most people would deem to be unethical, then the only way to sort of tear down that construct is to either, eliminate the incentives, right? Kill the money or just attack with power. And power means that, even if you are riding the gravy train and you're doing well and you're happy with the system you have, we have enough power where we're just going to knock it on its side. We're going to cow tip the elephant, and we're not going to allow you to do the thing that you're doing. And you think about that, I mean, that's kind of what you see, in a lot of areas in political life. I mean, even with the gay rights movement over the last 5 years, with President Obama, it kind of supporting that and everything else, a lot of that came from the power of the gay community. They put a ton of money into stuff. They push their agenda forward. Whether you agree with it or not, you're going to get in line, right? And so I think that something that can be learned from that is to understand when it comes to dealing with mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex, there has to be some sort of unifying power where people come together and just go after the system. And I think, for example, digging up these cases, and finding these people that have been falsely accused and convicted, I think it's going to take money. So maybe it requires, raising some money. Maybe it requires smart people like me and you and all the lawyers and PhDs and everybody else out here that cares about the issue kind of working together to attack this. It's going to require us to educate ourselves and to be relentless and uncompromising when it comes to just moving forward with this. So I think the education part is very important. I mean, I think that what Michelle Alexander has done with this book has been extraordinary by highlighting the issue. I think that what you and I do as scholars is very important because I think you need to teach. Because if you haven't been properly educated on what you're fighting for, then you're not going to feel motivated to fight, right? So I think that there is a role for the scholars, even those that just, yap all day, but you're absolutely correct. Two things that have to happen. Number one, if you are a scholar and you're speaking on an issue, you have to do what Michelle's doing, what you're doing, what I'm doing. You have to talk to the people. You can't just talk to your classroom. And then the next step beyond that is that talk must eventually convert into action, right? So, it's almost like a religion, right? You've educated people on what they should believe, and then you're giving them the tools and a battle plan to go fight for what they believe in. And that's where we've gotten off the bus, right? We haven't always come together with constructs on how we can get together and fight. So I respect what you're saying, and I'm going to follow up with you on this. I mean, I'm going to talk about this, offline, because I think that, as George Fraser once said, we don't need more PhDs, we need more PhDs. And you are a PhD. And I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pretty much done. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, or is that it?
I think we covered everything for this round. We'll pick up at another time.
Yeah, whenever we get started, it kind of goes on for a while, but it's great. I know people like the conversations, and I know I learn a lot every time I talk to you. So thank you so much, Dr. Chenelle Jones. I appreciate you. And thank you all for checking us out at the Your Black World Network. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.